Still on Rule 14, and the next section deals with the awakening of the sinners. He says the disciple must understand that he's dealing with energies, external and internal, when he's dealing with the sinners. And to deal with them successfully, he must understand how the sinners work and what they are. The awakening of the sinners comes in two stages. The first stage is where the disciple leads a disciplined spiritual life. He seeks purity, he seeks good health, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And as he succeeds, the sinners will naturally open. Now, so then after a natural awakening, the disciple then can focus on the various sinners and energize them. And he says, this is a complicated process, so the student must either have a wise teacher or follow his own soul. So he knows how to focus his attention. And he stresses this through his writings, not only here, but a number of places on the sinners, is that it's dangerous to stimulate the centers too much, too fast. The safest way to open up the centers is just by leading what people call the good life, emphasizing opening up brotherly love and doing good deeds, filling your mind with light, striving to take your next step forward. As we do these things, the centers naturally open up. And he says this is the safest way, and in many ways, the fastest way. What happens to some people, they'll go to some guru, and the guru will maybe teach something about stimulating the centers, and they get overstimulation. Overstimulation of the centers can be dangerous. Even the regular opening of the centers can be disturbing. For instance, as you just will be living your normal life, your normal attention span will stimulate the centers. For instance, a number of times I've given lectures or classes, and then a student will come up to me afterwards and say, I felt a tinkling in my throat or in my forehead during a class. And so what that was that there was some recognition that internally happened to this person that stimulated one of his or her centers. So one of the petals, one or more of the petals was starting to unfold, and this produces an actual sensation. Now, what will happen sometimes is the disciple moves forward in his progression, and then it's kind of like point of tension is finally reached, and that when that point is reached, finally a petal will unfold in one of the centers. When that petal unfolds, if it unfolds fairly quickly, it releases quite a bit of force in your being. And it's sometimes the disciple will wonder if he's going crazy or something, because he will feel a tremendous force being released, and it's sometimes so powerful it produces ill health in the person, because it's difficult for your body to handle it until it adapts. And so this force, as it's released, will last from anywhere from weeks to maybe even a couple of years. And then as you finally adjust to it, then everything will normalize and you will be strengthened. Now, if you don't adjust to it, then if you resist where the force is taking you, then the disciple will be plagued with ill health and lack of vitality. So when you feel energies just coming out of nowhere, if you ever do that, if you ever feel them coming out of nowhere, tune into it and tune into what you're supposed to learn and adapt, where it's supposed to be taking you. And if you go with the purpose behind this force, then you will be eventually revitalized and adapt to it. Just one example, say uh, you notice a lot of people that are very carnal don't have very many heart problems. Many of the people with heart problems are the more spiritually inclined. But what happens as a person goes through his lives and eventually he begins to develop spiritual love, then his petals, his love petals in his heart center unfold and release this energy. And as it releases this energy, the disciple is supposed to pick up on that and adjust his consciousness and his actions to match this energy. In other words, he becomes a more loving person, loving not just things that benefit himself, but loving for the sake of helping and assisting others and identifying with others. When he does this, then he can avoid heart problems. But if he doesn't do it, if he resists going with the flow of the spiritual energy, then he can wind up with a lot of heart problems. And finding the solution to where the resistance is very difficult. It's very difficult for the disciple to see because he's going into territory where he's never gone before. So he may ask himself, well, I'm a loving person, but he's almost everybody thinks they're a loving person. But where is that problem at that I'm resisting, that I'm not seeing? Because it's difficult to see that which you're now being taken into a territory and consciousness where you've never been before. So it's difficult to see where you are resisting. And this is takes sometimes trial and error. Sometimes the disciple, when he's making a major advance, goes through quite a number of lifetimes before he finally completely adjusts to a major unfoldment of energy. Has anyone ever here ever kind of just been going through your life, living the best you can, and then felt kind of a new type of energy come into you? Let's pick on somebody here. How about you, Adam? Have you ever had that happen to you?
I'm not sure, and I've experienced anything quite like that as you describe it.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what Rick was saying he's been experiencing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. How about you, Annie? Have you ever had that happen to you? Kind of a new type of energy come into you that you felt like you had to adapt to? Is she still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Well, I don't know if that's maybe. I remember when back in 85, 86, I was smoking cigarettes, and one day I got this. I was a smoker. I got this thought or energy, whatever you want to call it, that this has to stop. I have to stop it now. And so I did. I did stop it right at that moment. And the same thing happened when I became a vegetarian. Those things happened very close to each other. So I think it was kind of the same thing. Something had to change, and I had to do it now. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but that's what I experienced, at least at that time.
Yeah, no, Adam was saying that he wasn't sure, and you were a little bit in that direction, but let me kind of clarify this a little bit. all of you are having energies unfold right now. Every single person here is having some type of, your soul is unfolding some of the energy petals in your centers, and generally it happens where it's not a spectacular thing, but once in a while, sometimes maybe not even in a lifetime, but maybe every third life or something, you'll have a major unfoldment, and then you will have a tremendous, it will be unmistakably something that you will notice. But as they unfold gradually, just living through a good life, uh, the the pickup is very subtle. Now let's pick on Adam again, who wasn't sure, and probably he speaks for a number of people here. Have you ever had a time when you felt like a creative urge, Adam, that you never felt before?
Oh yeah. I think I've always, well, yeah, and you know, the creative part usually comes from a source of a lot of pain a lot of times, and creativity becomes the means of expression for that. So when I was a teenager, I had some of that. When I was still trying to work through issues, when I was still in the church, there were moments where um, that became the only outlet that I had, was to express it through writing or music or something like that.
Yeah, and that would be through your throat center, was the creative, and also your third eye stimulates creativity. So now, one thing a lot of religions do is they tend to suppress creativity. So if, and this is interesting, is that when the disciple feels some suppression, then that makes him go against that suppression. So now I know I felt when I was in the church that some of my creativity, they tend to, I felt it suppressed more than emphasized. When I was in the church, I felt like I had to go against some things to be truly creative. Did you kind of feel that way?
Yeah, I was going to say that's a good point. You know, times where I was called to teach, or you know, like to the elders quorum or something like that, and they're, you know, you got to just follow the manual, and I would try and make it creative and involve you know, some video or something from a movie, and boy, that wasn't well received. So
yeah, I remember, like I told you last week in the elders quorum, one time I taught a lesson from the Aquarian gospel, and I was lucky I didn't get thrown out at that point. But I put it in a very in a way that was quite acceptable. Well, old Curtis is here. Are you still down in Mexico? You look like you're.
Yeah, hola from Cancun.
Well, how's the weather down there?
Oh man, it's boiling. It's 85, 90 degrees, and we're just having a great time. We've seen the Mayan ruins and underground rivers, and they have these little cenotes. They're little clear pools of water you can go jump in.
So you down there with Loretta and Ken?
Yeah, and Alan and Doris.
Oh, okay.
Down here, and they said, "Come on down." So we did. We'll be.
I hear you get cheap dental work down there too, huh?
Yeah, I got an appointment, another one on Thursday morning. We're flying out Thursday. We're about an hour and a half out of Cancun.
Yeah, if you have a lot of dental work, it'll probably pay for your trip.
That's what they're doing. They had a lot of dental work, and it did. It did. But speaking of resistance in the Mormon church, one time I was with a bunch of guys that we were selling real estate, and we were out looking at new properties, and and I was looking for, openings so I could talk philosophy, because I just read the Aquarian Gospel and Life and Teachings, and Arnold Ehret's mucusless diet. And I was telling the guys in the car, yeah, I'm trying out this new diet. It's mucusless. You don't eat any meat or anything that creates milk or cheese. And one of the guys said, well, you need to be careful with that kind of behavior. Says the leaders of the church frown on that. They frown on it. Doing anything that's contrary to the normal way of being.
And the weird part about that is you weren't breaking any rules of the church just by going on a good diet.
No, according to the Doctrine and Covenants, I was, not eating meat. It says don't eat meat only in times of winter or famine or whatever. But it was different. It was different than what they were doing, and so it was wrong. Anything that is off the beaten path is suspect. And I said, well, those guys, they must do a lot of frowning if they're frowning on this.
Yeah, you and I used to joke about the pictures of the general authorities. A lot of them had permanent frowns on their faces.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, you, like you say, you break out of that mold, and then the streams of creativity just begin to flow through you. You feel inspired to read and write and communicate, and your throat center opens up. And speaking of throat center, your voice is sounding a little bit gravelly. Are you communicating too much over there, Mr. JJ?
I don't know. Yeah, I do. My voice does sound a little gravelly on these lessons sometimes. I don't know why. But
no, we need to look at that, but go ahead.
Well, I'm glad you're having a good time there. Everybody needs a break now and then.
Yeah, I just thought I'd check in. We don't always have internet, and we've got a house full of people, so I had to come out.
So when you coming back?
Thursday.
Okay.
Thursday, and then we'll do the Hercules class, not this Tuesday, although I might keep the Zoom open this Tuesday, 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, and then we'll do the Hercules class the Tuesday after for sure.
Okay. Well, don't do anything down there I wouldn't enjoy.
Well, I can. I'm with some pretty strict Mormons.
Oh yeah, you are with. That's kind of funny. Speaking about being constricted, Curtis is with his Mormon family there that are all very strict, and so I'm sure that he has to be careful not to say anything too offensive there to him.
Then a little bit. You have to, err on the side of caution there. And don't drink the water.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, since you don't drink anymore, you probably have to be real careful about what you drink down there in the south.
Yeah, you do. You do. You don't drink the water. Drink anything out of a can or a bottle is fine.
Yeah.
So I get along with these guys great because we don't drink, and they think I need to get back in and become a bishop.
Well, you can be a bishop here on the internet. We'll just call you Bishop Curtis here.
That's okay. That's funny.
Okay, well, good to have you report in, Curtis.
Yeah.
So DK continues here, and he says, not only are the centers and our bodies moved along, and it's part of the plan of the hierarchy, but humanity is a center of the planet itself. We are like the throat center of the planet Earth. And he says what the hierarchy is trying to do is stimulate the different parts of the petals of the throat center of humanity itself. And he says this is working out. They're attempting to purify humanity, and this purification of humanity, he says, is working out with more sanitation, better diets, better living conditions. And he says humanity has made great strides forward in the past couple of centuries. Says that, and when you look at this, it's really true. We complain about how we're polluting things and everything, but can you imagine living in a big city just maybe 150 years ago? There was like dung on the streets all over, and a lot of people, they would put their eliminations in a bucket and throw them out the window and stuff like this. And there was bad sanitation in all the major cities throughout the world. It was really terrible. If we had to go back and live in a major city a couple hundred years ago, we would have a hard time. We would just be amazed at what we would have had to put up with and the amount of putrefaction that was everywhere. So the sanitation has tremendously improved, and we can still go a lot farther. We've got a lot of problems and with the environment and the stuff that we're causing, but we will eventually solve these things. And what a lot of people do, they look at the problems that we have and they act like this will not be solved unless we just stop this or that, rather than the intelligence of humanity will eventually figure out good ways to solve each one of these problems that we have. Also, diet. We have a lot better diets. You realize a couple hundred years ago, the average lifespan was only about 40 years or so. And back at the time of Christ, you know what the average lifespan was?
Yeah, about 30, 33.
Yeah, I heard it was as low as 27 is what I've heard. But yeah, and one of the reasons was so many people went to war. I mean, if you had a family of like 4 boys in your family, the chances are 2 of them would wind up dead from fighting war somewhere or being drafted into the military. And so that was a big item. Another tremendously big item.
Dental work.
Exactly. Back in the old days, a lot of people died. They get an abscessed tooth and they didn't have professional help like we have today, and it often killed them. And so just good dental work has probably increased lifespan 10 years.
No, for sure.
People don't realize how important that was. I told that to my dentist. He didn't even know that. I said, well, you ought to be proud of being a dentist. I mean, and but the funny part about dentists, as a side note, is a survey showed that they are more tend to look upon their profession negatively because so many people complain of pain and discomfort going to the dentist and are afraid to go to the dentist, and it causes image problem in some dentists. But yeah, I told my dentist, you ought to be really proud to be a dentist, because when you go to a dentist and then you leave, you're always in better shape than when you arrived. And that doesn't always happen if you go to the hospital or to a regular doctor or to attorney or to any other profession. You often leave in worse shape than you arrive. But with a dentist, when you go, and then when you're going out the door, you're usually in better shape, 9 times out of 10 at least. So anyway.
So Joe, Jesus was an old man. He was 30 when he started his mission. Went until he was 33.
Yeah. Now there's always been a handful of people who live to be 90 or 100, but it's on the average back in the days of Jesus, it was probably around 30 or so. I've heard as low as 27, or could it be 30? They don't know for sure, but it was pretty short compared to today. And just a couple of hundred years ago, it was only about 45 or so. And now what the average is 78, 9, 80, depending on which country you're in. And so we're a lot better shape. We've made a lot of progress because of living conditions. And we don't realize that if we could go back in time and live in the Old West, or say in London in the 1700s, or New York, back in those days, we would see how it would just really hit us how much progress that we made. And we can breathe, even though the air isn't perfect, it's a lot cleaner than it was living in a city.
Well, London, Joe, was in 1666. That's when the big plague hit, and that was due largely to, like you say, insanitary conditions and rats and the bubonic plague, and it was spread through filth.
Yeah, yeah.
About wiped the country out.
And people didn't understand that the filth was what caused disease. They didn't really associate it. They probably sensed it, but it wasn't scientifically proven. Matter of fact, the first physician to come up with the idea of washing your hands before any type of surgery was laughed at by his fellow doctors, and eventually they sent him to an insane asylum because they thought he was crazy. And eventually he was proven right, that he talked about these, and must be some type of invisible force or germs that we're spreading with our hands, so we need to wash them. And they didn't believe that. The doctors thought that was the craziest thing they ever heard of. And now, of course, washing hands before any type of surgery or delivering babies is paramount. He even had statistics to prove he was right, because the doctors he was over, he had them wash their hands before delivering babies, and there was a lot fewer deaths of mother and child over his direction. But even that didn't convince his fellow surgeons. Anyway, a lot of progress has been made, and a lot of progress has been painful. He says, then he gets back to talking about the individual disciples, and he says only 1 in 1,000 aspirants is at the stage where he should begin to work with energy in his centers, and perhaps even that estimate is too optimistic. So he says the disciple can reach a stage to where he can focus on individual centers, just not go beyond just living the good life, but really focus. And he says just a handful are really prepared for this. So any experiments you do with the centers, there's several that are pretty safe. It's pretty safe to focus on the heart center, because love is the safest energy to deal with, especially if you're pretty well assured you have loving intent. That if you're a totally selfish person, then even that could be dangerous. But if you feel that you're a person with loving intent, focusing on the heart centers is the safest. Focusing on the third eye is also good to develop. Visualize a light in the head, but don't put too much attention on any one center for too long, unless you have some instruction from either your own soul or a teacher that knows what he's doing. And I personally don't know any teacher who knows what he's doing with the centers. Does anybody else know any? Okay. I think we're about as good as we can find right now, right here. He says the seeker must be very careful in stimulating the centers, for the release of energy can be disturbing if he's not sufficiently purified. He wants to proceed beyond the standard progress, and he must be in sound health and purified in mind and body, he says. So if you seek to stimulate, say, the third eye, the head center, the throat, creativity, the more purified you are, going to keep yourself on a decent diet, live a clean life, make sure your emotional body's in good shape, that you don't not harboring, especially not harboring a grievance. That's the biggest no-no you can have. If a person is harboring a grievance, then meditation will do him more harm than good, especially meditation on the centers. But if a person has pure intent, what is called the pure in heart. If a person is pure in heart, then it's a lot safer to proceed and visualizing the light in the head expanding and the centers being stimulated. The energy of the cells, which he calls fire by friction, must blend with the fire of consciousness. This fire produces sensitivity and awareness. It is a cause of response to contact and confers the ability to register and record impression. This is called solar fire. The goal is to blend these two fires with the highest, which is electric fire, or fire of the spirit, and this produces liberation. Now, he's written a whole book on this. It's called Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and it's all about the three fires. The lowest fire is fire by friction. And fire by friction produces life and heat in our physical body. So it keeps our physical body alive. Now you just light a match, that's also like fire by friction. But this same type of fire by friction produces physical life. And then the next is solar fire, and this produces awareness, and it's the consciousness that is in your higher self, your soul. And so this produces uh, creativity, and he says these fires must blend. So the fire by friction, the fire that invigorates the life of our physical body, must blend with the fires that's in our soul, which he calls solar fires. And then there's a higher fire still called electric fire, and that's the fire of pure spirit, or your originating source, or the monad. And eventually, he says, all these three fires must blend and produce liberation. Right now, everyone that isn't a master pretty much is working on blending the fires of the higher and lower selves. Once a person approaches becoming a master or a higher, then he's focusing on blending the three fires, and that produces liberation. Now, the blending of these fires is dangerous if done prematurely. And this is one thing I've noticed, is that I have encountered a number of people that have been stimulated with spiritual fire, and a short time later, if they didn't go by that higher consciousness that they were supposed to merge with, that they just about went insane afterwards. Have you noticed that, Curtis, with several people that we've taught?
Yeah, Greg.
Yeah.
He's read the Tibetan and figured he was higher than Sanat Kumara. But I think what it did for him, it burned out some of his etheric webbing, or some of the material that protects you from the too hot of an electric fire.
Yeah.
So it blends prematurely and it can burn you out. A few
Yeah.
people in California I encountered that were that way. They were unbalanced, and they focused too extremely on opening certain centers and channels that they weren't ready for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that often happens, that when these things happen, I've like one group I was teaching that I give them quite a bit of stimulation, and then all of a sudden, as I was teaching the class, a group that I had taught maybe a dozen lessons to, all of a sudden one of the guys said, "I am God. I am speaking through this vessel, and I am telling you, Joseph, that you are on the wrong path and you're going to be destroyed." And now he went on telling me how I was just the worst person on the planet. And so this guy got a little stimulation, but because of something in him that was kind of warped, he started channeling God himself in his mind, and he spoke with this really
Weird voice.
strong voice, loud voice, and he went on to try to get followers and everything, and never mounted anything. But
How about Onias?
oh yeah.
I don't know if he was overstimulated. He might have been a glamour for him, an ego trip.
Well, the very first revelation he got told him to not seek for position, as do the wicked. And then as soon as he got together with us, he wanted to tell us what to do and be our prophet.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's interesting how these things develop. So it's overstimulation of the centers. If a person doesn't have pure intent, he will if he does contact anything, it'll be some astral force that gives him what he's wants to hear, pretty much, but nothing that will produce light. What you want to look for in our brothers and sisters and any teacher we have is the ability to turn on a light, to stimulate light, and through true principles.
And if you follow them, where will it lead you?
Yeah, if we follow true principles, then it leads us to better opportunities and better development. He says the disciple must learn to place his consciousness in his etheric body while still maintaining control over the physical. The seeker must remove obstructions between centers for a free flow of energy. So that's an interesting statement. He says, place the consciousness in the etheric body. Something to contemplate on. He doesn't elaborate on this a lot, but normally our consciousness is more in the physical body than in the alternative etheric body. But the etheric body is where where the point of power is. If the etheric body were separated, the physical body dies and just disintegrates. But the etheric body holds all form in place, and that's where the point of power is. So focus on the invisible more than the visible. And when the invisible becomes the point of power, then it becomes visible to the higher senses. He says each center in the spine is separated from the one above it and below it by an interlaced protective web, which is composed of a curious blend of etheric and gaseous substance. This has to be burned away and dissipated before a free play of fires can manifest. So we have 7 centers going up the spine and the head, and between each of the centers is a web. And this web is for protective purposes, because if the web were just instantly removed, you would have the person would have so much energy released, it would be more than he could handle and either drive him insane or produce ill health. So this webbing is worn away gradually and produces an interplay of the centers and allows a more free flow of energy up the spine, and takes many, many lifetimes to remove all this webbing. He says there are 4 of these interlaced webs lying between the 5 centers found on the rod of the spinal column. And then there are 3 to be found in the head. There are 3 that bisect the head and form a series of crosses. And he, in the book, if you look on this page, it gives them, there's there's webbing that separates the third eye from the head center. And then there's also webbing that separates the 2 head centers from the throat center. And as this webbing begins to dissolve, then the body is more filled with light. The person will feel more creative. And creativity is one of the signs of higher development. When the person begins to feel a creative urge to be able to write or do art or maybe even a business that's creative, there's lots of avenues for creativity. So creativity is one of the first things the disciple experiences that leads him to opening up also the third eye and the head centers and removing that webbing. So that's one thing. If the disciple wants to know, well, what can I do? It's a good idea to just think, well, what can I do to be creative? What can I do that maybe I haven't done before? If nothing else, just say learn something, take a class,
Read a book.
Read, and as you do this, you'll be stimulated, thinking, hey, this person did this, I bet I could do that. If he can do it, I can do it. And that's a really good attitude to have, because what one person can do, any person can do if they put their attention on it. The only difference between Leonardo da Vinci and Joe Blow on the street is that Leonardo put tremendous attention on what he was doing. And we all have the same ability to produce the same desired end. So that's one thing that's inspired me throughout my life. I think, well, so-and-so did this, so I could probably do it. And if you put enough attention on it, then what you will find out is you can do it. And when you do this, you'll be stimulating your higher centers, starting with your throat center, then it'll stimulate your third eye. And what stimulates your third eye is the realm of ideas. Because as you're stimulated by other people that are able to do things, then you're stimulated, and then your third eye is stimulated. When your third eye is stimulated, then you will get ideas. You will get flashes of inspiration. You will think, and it could be in a lot of areas, not only just writing or whatever, but it could be in business, it could be in your profession, but stimulate your ideas, stimulate your creativity. This will really help all disciples to develop the higher centers.
That's why it's good to be in a group with people that can plus your ideas or support your ideas or help you motivate yourself with your ideas, your own creativity. What I liked about the Aquarian gospel is it said, what I have done, Jesus was speaking, what I have done, all men can do.
Yeah, that really inspired me when I read that. I thought, even if this guy just made this whole thing up, that's a reading
That's
that
a
one
pretty good
line
statement.
is worth the whole book because it's true. You know, what one person can do, others can do. And that's one thing that's inspired me throughout my life is when I've seen somebody else do something, I think, well, what's preventing me from doing it? And so that's a really important principle. And also, like you talk about group activity is where what we want to do in a group is take the highest in each one of us and make it available to the whole group. And by tuning into each other in a group formation, you can obtain the inspiration that the highest in the group is capable of. So contemplate that also. He says a web on the left and right separate the ajna and head centers from, and the horizontal one separates the throat from the head. So yeah, we have to remove those separations over a period of time. And as they're removed, you know, as you close your eyes and see a greater and greater light during periods of contemplation, and you feel greater inspiration coming, you feel more flashes of light, you feel more aha moments, and you will know you are on the right path. Now, aha moments just don't come every day, but they do come once in a while, and so that's really great when they do come. Okay, we're near the end of our time. Any comments or questions before we finish her
And
up?
I think those aha moments come for me when reading the words of the masters, when I begin to see clearly what they mean. And I've noticed that for myself in the last 3 or 4 years, when I study and meditate, but it seems like the crown of my crown chakra is like vibrating, and my hair feels like my hair is standing up.
Well, that's a good sign, Ed. Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah, that's
yeah, I found out
probably a really
something
good sign.
interesting, Jake.
What's say?
That the saying that energy follows thought is actually the first part of a sentence, and the rest of that sentence is, and the eye directs the energy, meaning the eye, the third eye,
Yeah.
where the mind's at, directs the energy. So energy follows thought, and the eye directs the energy. That's the complete sentence on that. I thought that was interesting. I found that through the Theosophical Society, William Meter.
Yeah, that's a good point. That sounds very sound to me.
I'll go with that.
Yeah. Okay, and another thing with the third eye is practice seeing. Close your eyes and focus on your third eye, and practice seeing what is in your third eye, and images will come to your mind, and follow those images. And so that'd be a good thing to focus on during the next week for the group. See if you can capture any images given to you from your third eye, which can see in all directions.
The all-seeing eye.
That's right.
Well, I have a little comment. A lot of people have said, well, you know, I want to be in the presence of a master where I can learn and at the feet of the master. And in this book, The Labors of Hercules, the Tibetan says that's pretty much an impossibility. He says if you were in the presence of a master, the energy would be so bright and so hot it would destroy your etheric webbing, and you'd be basically useless. He said what the masters do, he says they'll enter your presence briefly and leave a hint about your work upon the path. They don't give you useless information about day-to-day living, but if it applies to your personal dharma or your work upon the path of enlightenment, they will give you a hint, and then they'll leave and see what you do with that hint. And if you do good things with it, they'll come back and give you another hint. And that's how they work.
Right. Same thing with your soul. Your soul, pure soul energy is very powerful. So
Right.
and it's a master on its own plane. So we actually have a master through our higher self that's available 24/7 whenever we want to really tune in. So that's a good point too.
He says that the masters will leave you a hint after you've connected with your own soul. You're right. So you have to connect with your own inner master.
Right. When you connect with your soul is in connection with the soul of all the masters. And so it's like I talk about the group, the spiritual internet out there. The physical internet is merely inspired by the true spiritual internet that's always been there.
Right on.
And right now, if you want to know something, you just Google it. If I want to Google the planet Venus or whatever, you got information just right there, and that's the way it should be with our souls if we really want to know that we get better and better at Googling our souls. If you Google wrong, you put in the wrong words and stuff, then you don't get a very good answer. And this is the problem we have. We're Googling our souls, but we don't always know what the right questions are to ask or the right way to make it happen. And so we eventually learn to approach the higher self in such a way that we can get accurate answers. Okay, any other comments or questions before we wrap it up here?
We have around this planet what's called the ocean of love intelligence and the sea of mental garbage. So wherever we tune ourselves into, we receive knowledge from the ocean of love intelligence or the sea of mental garbage.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Any other comments before we wrap it up?
Nope.
Well, thanks for showing up, everybody, and we will plan on another class, all being well, next Sunday at 2:00. So until then, may the force be with you.
Hola from Cancun.
Yeah. Okay.
Bye-bye, everyone.
See you
So
next
long,
week.
everybody.